Now the story of the Jewish exiles who lost everything, and the one man who had no choice but to help them rebuild it. It's the book of Nehemiah. As I mentioned yesterday, I get to do a wedding this week, which is just the coolest. I love these things. I don't know about the fancying up part. It's not really my best look. I don't know. Suits are difficult for me, but I have a couple of them. I know how to tie a tie. I can get it done. So we get all dressed up and we get all these people together, and it's easy as a dude, a practical man of the West, to be like, the flowers, the accoutrements, the outfits, all a little overdone, all a little pretentious, isn't it? Yeah, but I think that impulse is wrong on my part. I think that's one of the really cool things about weddings, is that it is a way of saying, dang, we're taking this seriously. We're setting apart this day, consecrating this day, because we are doing something special here. Now, maybe not everybody would put the same language on it and describe it that way, but everybody knows a wedding is special. Everybody knows this isn't a normal run-of-the-mill deal. This isn't another click the box that says that I affirm the terms of services for the fast food app that I just put on my phone that I didn't read and I'll never read, and just there, fine, just put it in. I want my 40 cents off my next order of fries. It isn't that. Everybody knows that it's significant, that it's not like other deals that we make. And there are a whole bunch of little cues that go into that tell us that we still have this vestigial memory of what a covenant is when we go to a wedding. And I think getting prettied up is one of the main ones that tells everybody this is something special. Well, in Nehemiah 10, we are going through a covenant ceremony. It is not a wedding per se, but it has a lot of the same elements. And a wedding is the easiest thing for me to liken it to. When you go to a wedding, for the reasons I just mentioned and for other reasons as well, you know you are at a wedding. There was an invitation. Everything is prettied up. There's a certain vibe to a wedding. You know what you're there to do. Likewise, in Nehemiah chapter 10, everybody knows why they're there and what is about to happen. In Nehemiah 9, they were kind of warming up for this. This is maybe sort of like the engagement period. This is where the narratives got squared away. Yep, God, we were supposed to be faithful to you, and we really weren't. We didn't keep the covenant that our forefathers made with you. We liked what our neighboring peoples were doing better. We latched onto that. It was ruinous in every way. We renounce all of that, and we want to be in right covenant relationship with you. That's kind of the summary of Nehemiah chapter 9. We get into Nehemiah 10. It's like, all right, well, then it's time for the ceremony. Probably everybody gets real fancied up after they got done with their happy festival, followed by their sad festival. Now they're dressed up for an event. They're probably wearing impressive clothes, probably wearing clothes that are indicative of the role they play in society. And indeed, a couple of days ago, very clumsily and quickly, I sang to you the names of all of the people who were sealing this covenant in Nehemiah chapter 10. I might have said the word signed in there somewhere, but if I did, I regret that, because sealed really is the right word. It's more than just a signature or ticking a box and then selecting okay. They are putting their name and their reputation and their family name on this thing, looking backwards and looking forwards into time. We see that the first station to be honored in the portion of Nehemiah 10's covenant ceremony that is basically akin to the processional that you get in a wedding. The first person to be honored is Nehemiah the governor. He comes in and gets seated. Next up, the priests come in and metaphorically get seated. Then the Levites, and then all of the leaders of the people. But those aren't the only people who are there. There's also a bunch of people in the crowd. And when you go to a wedding, the processional is very important. And yeah, maybe you haven't thought about it before. Maybe you have. If you're a dad and you've walked a daughter down the aisle, you've probably thought about it before. But it's important because it's a moment to honor the individuals, regardless of position, who need to be uniquely honored for this thing to come together. I mean, what are we really doing at a wedding? We're getting everybody together to say we all vouch for this. We're all signing off on it. So you march in all the people who, because of just who they are, their personality, their role in the narrative of these two people, they have to be in the room and seated and honored in some way. But we're also honoring people because of their title, their role that they occupy. I've been to many weddings with parents or relatives, family members who frankly weren't awesome, maybe did some really screwed up stuff even, but you have the role of mother and you're going to be walked in properly, and you're going to be honored in that role. You have the role of father. You're going to walk this woman down the aisle. You have whatever other role it might be. And so the processional is kind of what we're talking about here in Nehemiah chapter 10, verses 1 through 27 that I sang. Then we get to the next part, and this part that I'm about to read here, verses 28 and 29. To me, it seems like this would be akin to the part where the pastor gets up or the priest gets up at the beginning and says something very obvious, like, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join so-and-so and so-and-so together in holy matrimony." And at that point, you're still on autopilot as an attendee because you're like, yeah, dude, I know. I got the invitation. We all have on the clothes and everything. You're wearing a tie. I know exactly what we're here to do. I mean, a bride just walked in to Canon in D or some variation thereof. I know what's happening here, but why is he doing that? Well, because he's announcing that you are at a covenant ceremony, and that any attendee of a covenant ceremony is a participant in a covenant ceremony, and that if you are here and you are old enough to understand, you are bearing witness to a thing and therefore have a role in the thing, even if you're not seated in the first couple of rows, even if you're not standing up front with the wedding party. So with all of that in mind, here's the part that I think is akin to the priest announcing what we're doing here. Verse 28. The rest of the people, priests, Levites, gatekeepers, singers, temple servants, and all who separated themselves from the neighboring peoples for the sake of the law of God, together with their wives and all their sons and daughters who were able to understand. So now we're talking about the people in the seats, right? Everybody, we kind of just got the wedding party there with this first 27 verses, the representatives of the people and the religious leaders and all of that stuff. These are the people who are going to represent everyone and put their names on this covenant. They're going to seal it with their reputations and their particular roles. But everybody else is there as well. And anybody who's able to understand, even to the lowliest of stations, is also participating in this covenant. This is where it's a little different than a wedding, because only two people get married at a wedding. Here, all the people are marrying themselves to this covenant, even though maybe for practical purposes or cultural purposes, only a handful of the people are actually physically laying their seal or their signature on the thing. So that's who's there. Verse 29. All these now join their brothers and nobles and bind themselves with a curse and an oath to follow the law of God, given through Moses, the servant of God, and to obey carefully all the commands, regulations, and decrees of the Lord our God. Everybody knows what everybody is there to do in verse 29. Well, of course we're here to bind ourselves with a curse and an oath to follow the law of God through Moses, the servant of God, and to carefully obey the commands, regulations, and decrees of the Lord our Lord. I mean, they said that at the end of chapter 9. In view of all this, we're making a binding agreement, putting it in writing, and our leaders, our Levites, and our priests are affixing their seals to it. So we know exactly what we're here to do, but just in case anyone is lagging behind and thinking that this is passive and that it's just something that they observe, like for entertainment or religious ritual, it's not. If you're here, you are signing off on this as well, even though you might not be one of the representatives imprinting your seal upon it. But surely in there, you caught the language about the curse and the oath, and that is very much the structure of an ancient covenant. Sometimes the deals come with more harsh punishment to really discourage a violation of a deal. But this is just the basic of it. And they all have a curse and an oath. They all have a here's what we're going to do, and then they all have a here's what's going to happen if one of us don't hold up our end of the bargain clause as well. Well, where does that fit in a wedding? You ever thought about that? Because I don't think the curse thing is usually real explicitly spelled out, but I do think it's in there implicitly. When the priest or the pastor gets up there at the beginning, he talks about, what we're here to do. We're going to join this man and this woman together in holy matrimony. There's usually stuff after that where he talks about just kind of what holy matrimony is and what's going to happen with the paces here of the day. And what he's doing is saying that hey, there's all these blessings that come with the covenant of marriage. It's really good. It's literally life-giving, literally life-making. It casts ripples forward through time. It's an opportunity for blessing upon blessing to extend far beyond the orbit of the two people we're putting together here today in marriage. They're going to lay out all the blessings of that. Implicitly, the curse that everybody's signing off on, if this thing should be violated, is, well, then you wouldn't get that anymore. Now that's tough. And I'm guessing that hit a few of you in the gut who are listening to this right now, because I know that many of you had this and now you don't. Many of you went through this kind of a covenant and it didn't work. And some of you right now are feeling that dark anxiety and guilt thing that rears up every time you think about how you had this and you wrecked it. And you know that it was on you. Maybe a bunch of little decisions, maybe a couple of real big decisions. I don't know. Life is weird. Things break, things happen, but also some things really linger with us. And I know there are some of you who are feeling that emotion right now. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to bring up difficult things. I know there are others of you who went through this covenant of marriage and now you don't have a marriage anymore. And what you feel is victimhood. You feel hurt that the deal didn't hold. And surely there are others of you who had the covenant of marriage. You had this and now you don't, and you don't even understand why. You're still trying to figure that out. There are others of you who with bittersweetness hear me talk about this, and you miss a wonderful, beloved spouse who's passed on into the next life. And there's a sweetness in remembering them on the occasion of this conversation we're having right now. But there's also that pang of sadness and loss and missing them. And I'm sorry for your loss as well. The reason I bring up the curse and the oath part of this is not to pry open any wounds or dump any lemon juice in there. No, not at all. The reason I bring it up is because even in this beautiful covenant ceremony that we still participate in to this day, that is a vestige of the ancient world, there is still the implicit part of any covenant that is present, which is, here's the pain that happens if it goes away. And so though we might not spell that out super explicitly in most modern ceremonies of marriage, it's still there, and it's definitely here in all ancient world covenants as well. Here's what we're going for. This is what we're promising to do. Here's what happens if we don't. And all these people, the formal ones whose names are on the list in the first 20 verses of Nehemiah chapter 10, and the people they represent who aren't named but are there and they're old enough to understand, all of them are binding themselves to this oath with eyes wide open, knowing that there's tremendous upside, but also that all covenants come with an oath and with a curse, even if that might not be the language we would use for it today. It's still the deal. All of these people have run the calculation and said, the threat of getting it wrong, God forbid I or we ever should get it wrong, in no way outweighs the possibilities and opportunities of what comes with being in right relationship, in covenant relationship with this God. It's worth it. Let's commit ourselves to this thing now because of the great and tremendous right side upness of this opportunity to be in covenant with God. Since yesterday, I've heard back from more of you who got the Galatians notebook that we sent out to everybody who supports the program, and the little note that I wrote, and the Nehemiah sticker. Thank you for the kind feedback on that. I'm glad you like it. I've also heard from a couple of you where we got something wrong or we didn't ship it quite right or whatever. That can happen. I don't know, it's a family operation. We brought in some kids to help us with it. I'm sure we got something wrong somewhere. So don't be shy about that. If you didn't get all the things that are supposed to be in there, it's really easy for us to get that fixed. So apologies to the couple of you who we missed for. And if there's anybody else, let us know. It ain't weird. We want you to have these things and we'd be delighted to send them back out. Just shoot me an email to thetmbh@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to get me for that, or really whatever. If there's something else that's on your mind, you can also hit me up at thetmbh@gmail.com. All right, more on Nehemiah 10 next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.